Okay, everyone. Good morning. Thank you guys for attending. First off, my name is Mark Eberhardt, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Degreed. Wanted to first welcome everyone to our March webinar. This is our our April webinar. This is our third webinar of the year. We do these every month, and we hope you find value in it today, and will join us for future webinars. So a little bit about Degreed. At Degreed, our mission is to track and measure all learning, including what people learn outside of traditional learning management systems. Today's topic is how to build a learning culture at your company. The speaker would be David Blake, the founder and CEO of Degreed. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dave to get us started. And just one last note for those who just joined us. Feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. If you look at your GoToWebinar tab or panel, scroll down, it's on the right rail, scroll down to the questions section at the bottom. You can ask questions at any time throughout. We'll either respond to them during the webinar, or we'll have Dave address them at the end in the Q&A portion. Today's webinar, we're going to be spending 35 minutes approximately on the presentation, leave about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. So again, without further ado, I'll turn it over to David Blake.
Thank you, Mark, and it's good to be with you all. I'm joining you from sunny Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm attending the ASU plus GSV Education Innovation Summit. So we're kind of in the middle of it here. It's been an exciting conference, but excited to be joining with you guys today to be talking about building a learning culture inside of your organization. So as Mark mentioned, kind of 35 minutes, we're really just going to quickly cover why and then spend our time together today on really a framework on how to establish that learning culture. So again, quickly, what's the why to all of this? I love this quote. We've leaned on it quite a bit as an organization internally at Degreed. But in the long run, the only sustainable competitive advantage is your organization's ability to learn faster than the competition. You know, you are all in your professions. We are all here because I believe that this is something we already believe in. And another just kind of fun one, but learning is not compulsory, neither is survival. But getting past kind of the fun quotes, you know, what kind of data do we have to back up learning cultures and the efficacy and kind of the power and the impact of learning cultures inside the organization? And of course, looking to Bersin here, but in their exhaustive survey of the 40,000 companies, along 10 dimensions, the results kind of across everything they studied, the single biggest driver of business impact is the strength of an organization's learning culture. You know, so really, wow, you know, really pretty incredible of kind of all the things. The learning culture has the largest impact in driving our outcomes. And it's, you know, thinking back to that quote, over the long run, that is certainly true. You know, over a short time horizon, we can kind of jigger things and get short-term outcomes, probably along other dimensions. But over the long run, learning culture is truly kind of the biggest driver of our ability to drive outcomes. And high-impact learning cultures outperform their peers in several areas. So, you know, first to market, employee productivity, customer needs, delivering quality, have more likely to have the skills to meet future demand and more likely to be a market share leader. So kind of across the board material gains. And just as a quick reinforcement, Deborah Davis and Barbara Daly's study reinforced this finding at about the same time. So again, as promised, was just quick. I believe we're all here because we believe and want and desire this. So without further ado, kind of jumping into our framework around learning cultures. So first, again, a couple of fun quotes. Anyone who joined us last month, this was in there as well. Again, a favorite internally at Degreed. But love this one from Dan Pink. Control leads to compliance. Autonomy leads to engagement. And the first thing I want to talk about before I introduce kind of the framework is truly this distinction that when we talk about learning culture, learning is a function of that, but I want to actually draw these out and talk about them as two distinct things. You can learn and you can have learning inside your organization without having a culture of learning. And it's not just binary, it's by degrees. But learning can happen without a learning culture being present. And, so truly you can force people to learn, but you cannot force a learning culture. So while related, these things are separate, and as we start into the framework, we have to begin the journey of pulling these apart. When I talk about learning culture, I'm not talking about learning. And these statements won't always, they will be obviously false if you carry with you kind of that presumption that as I talk about learning culture, I mean learning. There's several things about learning that can be true as I speak separately about learning culture. And just an instructional designer shared this to kind of last quote before we jump into the framework. So we can't just offer courses that are useful for us. We have to offer something that benefits the employee or they won't participate. So again, drawing out that distinction of you can force the learning, but you can force compliance, but you can't force engagement. You can't force culture. You can't force participation. And so, albeit simple, this is the framework we are going to spend our time with and kind of look at, which is just simply the Venn diagram of the organization's needs versus the employee's needs. And so 69% of all L&D buyers believe that they shouldn't have to choose between the needs of the organization and the employee. So, that's a great, so nearly 70%, incredible starting off point, that already a majority of the professionals don't believe that it has to be either or, that both can be served. So we've got that area in the middle of the Venn diagram that, in theory, there's an area where we shouldn't have to choose, that we can serve both the needs of the employee and the organization. But, impressively, truly, was that 29% said that they should focus more on the needs of the end user. And so that really leaves only, the remainder, 2%, that believe that the organization's needs should be met first in trying to establish a learning culture. So, already we are off to a good start. That, we need to empower the employees. But we've got this, remember this data point. We've got 70% where, the ideal, the hope is that we can find this middle ground where we are serving both the organizations and the employees' needs. So as we talk about empowering employees, how do we do so? One of the first things we come up against is cost and spend, and where we invest our time and our money. And from David Grebo, we get only about 25% or less of what we use in our jobs through formal learning. Yet most of today's investments in corporate education are on the formal side. The net result is that we spend most of the money on the smallest part of the learning equation. So what does that look like in our framework? So on the left, we've got that the formal training, the compliance, and per David Grebo, that's about 25% of what we will use in our actual jobs, but it's the majority of the spend. In contrast to the employees' self-directed learning, that's about 75% of what we actually use to succeed in our jobs, and yet it is reinforced with almost none of the spending. And so, while again our opening statistic, kind of 70-30, was very encouraging, very promising, already we're beginning to draw out the radical distinction that we're not putting our money where our mouth is, and that the dollars all go towards meeting the organization's needs. But in seeing the 25 versus 75, it draws out the distinction that that there's a dissonance there, that we are spending the majority of the money on a minority of the learning that is leveraged to succeed in our individual jobs. And again, you'll see 2 or 3 kind of quotes and data points reused from previous webinars, and this is one of them. But so this was a survey that Degreed administered, and really kind of draws out, so again, distinctly this distinction. So kind of that 25% formal training is what we use in our actual jobs versus 75%. So we asked, would you rather learn at HR's direction or be given credit for your own learning? And overwhelmingly, nearly 90% of people say that they would rather get credit for their own learning. Now that's all fine and great. Most people rather would be empowered and be autonomous, but that's fine and good, but which is more effective? And in surveyed along that dimension, you do see the number shift, but still overwhelmingly, now it comes pretty close to that 25-75. Believe that the learning directed by the organization, about 1/4 of people believe that is more effective, but 3/4 of people believe that the learning at their own direction is more effective. And so our opening data point, very promising. The split between leverage and spend, we begin to see dissonance. This reinforces, truly we've got to begin to focus on that right circle, the employee, the informal, the self-directed. But let's go back for a moment. So 70% of professionals believe they shouldn't have to choose, and in the middle is what I like to call strategic learning. So meeting the needs of the organization is the formal, the training. In some organizations, compliance, regulated, mandated learning, but we will just call it, kind of for our purposes, training. And the meeting the needs of the employee, truly empowering them, kind of giving them autonomous learning, giving them the money to learn what they need, that begins to foster a culture of learning. Now, 70% believe we shouldn't have to choose. There is this middle ground, and what is better than kind of the synergy of learning the stuff that is both going to meet the needs of the organization, be aligned with the organization, and that the employee is truly interested in and is meeting their needs as well. So that's strategic learning right there in the middle. And that is our target. That is our goal. But the reality is that it's a trap. There is no such thing as strategic learning when driven top-down. And that's the first mental trap that we have to kind of expose as we think about establishing a learning culture. And and why this is it's captured as simply as at Degree we work with organizations large and small. So clients as small as 20, 25, 50 employees, companies as large as hundreds of thousands of employees worldwide. In any case, I'm the CEO of Degreed, and we've got now about 50 employees ourselves. And it's an impossibility to know the needs of your individual employees. I can know the needs of the organization, but it is impossible for me to know the desires, the goals, the dreams, the aspiration, the real-time challenges and demands of each of my employees. It's an impossibility. And so while we see this middle ground, the strategic learning, and think, oh great, how do we draw that out? How do we, foster learning and yet create organizational alignment? How do we achieve this strategic learning? And the reality is you cannot. You do not know what your employees are facing. You cannot at scale. It's an impossibility. You do not know their aspirations. You do not know their goals. You do not know their challenges. And in not knowing that, it is, therefore, an impossibility to administer the training and the learning to them that is going to meet their needs. It might meet your needs, but that's just training. And it's an impossibility to believe that we can systematically mandate and drive towards that strategic learning. So I call that the disillusionment trap. So with that kind of stark assertion, let's then step into kind of looking to the learning culture. So you might all have remember and be familiar with Peter Drucker's quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Well, thinking of our disillusionment trap, learning culture, it eats strategic learning for breakfast. It really is. It's all about establishing a culture of learning, and that's what we are going to begin to examine. So again, as I talk about this, as I draw this out, don't, this isn't an argument against learning. Again, if we think about learning and a learning culture separately, if we think about training and compliance training and learning culture separately, an argument for a positive learning culture is not an argument against compliance training, against formal training, against meeting the needs of the organization. So it's not that want to draw that out, but it really is drawing this distinction that establishing a learning culture is related to but separate from those efforts. And hopefully they are mutually beneficial and positively reinforce one another. But we will continue to talk about the learning culture. Don't assume it's at the pitted against just formal training. And the other distinction before I jump into this that I'd like to draw out is, so Herzberg, 1963. So it's he is the mind behind the two-factor theory of motivation, which is drew out the distinction that our dissatisfaction and our satisfaction in our employment are separate. They are separate, so that you can both be dissatisfied and satisfied at the same time, because dissatisfaction is driven by a list of hygiene factors, and satisfaction is driven by a list of motivation factors. Most aptly, compensation being our one of the big hygiene factors of, if I am not being paid enough, I will be dissatisfied, but I can still like my colleagues and like the challenge that I'm up against and have satisfaction. And so same thing, two-factor theory, we are looking at these separately. And, we, in this case, we are, as we look at the learning culture, we're really thinking about the motivation factors if we use that framework of two factors there. We are looking at the things that create satisfaction, that enable the culture. We will have to say, for a separate conversation, the things that can kill a learning culture. Equally important, but today we're really going to focus on kind of that positive building of the culture. So with that, as we kind of contrast the organization's need with learning with the employees' learning. And so we will soon have, it'll be inside the next couple of months, 1 million learners on the Degree platform. I've had, at this point, immense opportunities to interact with a lot of the world's greatest learners. And, this is just my list of really what people optimize for in their personal learning. And so first is, it really is driven by the dream. It is driven by a goal. It's driven by, who they want to become. Second, incredibly critical is that it is mentor-driven. It is, you can get started by yourself. It is really hard to get very far by yourself. And so if I really want to skill myself up, at some point I need to be learning with other people. The third is, content creation. That is, I set out to learn myself. We begin by content consumption, but ultimately I've got to engage, I've got to create, I need projects, I need a challenge to apply myself to really cement and test and learn, and that has to be present. Fourth, people value incredibly highly experiences in their learning. This is made incredibly obvious by higher education, by the experiences we have there, the fact that the content is now online and for free, and yet we continue to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to attend university and graduate degrees. We value highly the experience. And lastly is that in doing so, I come away with a credential or a skill. And credential in the case where what I'm learning is immediately transactable. And in the case where it is, I can really just carry the skill with me. Now, this is in contrast. I won't go through the organization's needs, but kind of, tit for tat, it's in contrast to, as we meet the organization's need, it's driven by our strategy. It's top down. We really usually administer training in the form of courses or something that looks very similar. It's a task usually that I just have to complete, and when I am done, what I get is I am in compliance. It is less frequent that I am left with a externally recognized credential based on formal training. And thinking about that, part of the reason why, as professionals, we administer learning largely in the form of courses is because that's the framework. I mean, it's to administer training at scale is really a task of curation, of course creation. I need bigger chunks to be able to do it at scale. But the reality is that that isn't actually how most people learn. So it's 40%. It's just a little, less than half of the workforce has not completed a course of any type since college. And in contrast, people learn, half of working professionals say they learn something every single day using kind of informal methods. So, part of embracing learning culture is getting past that, again, formal course-driven learning, embracing the self-directed and the kind of micro chunks. Sorry, this one's getting cut off just slightly down there at the bottom. But so we're going to now examine learning culture. So if training is the word we are using for the learning that is meeting the needs of the organization, strategic learning is what happens in the instance where we meet both in organizations and employees' needs, where we are helping employees learn beyond the needs of the organization, truly focusing on the needs of the employees. And again, explicitly beyond the needs of the organization. And at this point, it is explicitly beyond the mutual point of alignment. That is where we begin to establish a true learning culture. And as we, I'll just go to Andrew's quote. So he's the CEO of Safari Books. Also had just a lot of exposure to organizations and learners directly. And this quote comes from him. But when building a true culture of learning, it doesn't matter what people learn, just how they learn anything at all. And this is, in the professional context, begins to be kind of a true break. As we think back to the 25-75, where we spend our money, we kind of want, again, that the disillusionment trap, We want to think that we can meet the needs of the organization and that there is this point of overlap. That's where we will be at the highest leverage. There's a lot that is very satisfying about the belief that we can do that. But a learning culture, almost by definition, is just empowering people to learn, and to learn often, and to stay curious, and to stay engaged. And to do so, every single one of your employees is a human being. They are multifaceted. They have lives that exist beyond the 9 to 5 of working at our organizations. And we learn along many dimensions. And part of it is we have to embrace that. If it's a culture of learning that we want, then we have to embrace that. If it's training, if it's learning that we want, we can do other things. But if it is a culture of learning, then it is about truly engagement, empowerment. And that comes by letting people learn whatever they want. You know, knitting, World War II history, cooking, and doing so as part of the program, as part of the company's program around learning. And what that does for us, so this is maybe in contrast to how many of us think about a corporate learning culture. But what it begins to do for us is it begins to meet people where they're at, how they actually learn, how they actually spend their time with, what their genuine intrinsic curiosities are, what they are learning. And if you can leverage that and then make it social, you know, you begin to get a very strong reinforcing effect begin to take place in your organization. This is one of many, 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 but just put up here kind of the stats on, you know, exercise is contagious. You know, there's a lot of stats now about, you know, moods on Facebook being contagious. And truly, as we make learning social, it becomes contagious. And so it begins with empowering people to learn whatever they want, to meet their own needs, their own curiosities, their own dreams, their own ambitions, and to empower them to learn whatever they want. But then as you make it social, as you begin to make this transparent, then everyone begins to see the other people learning. And it's encouraging, it's reinforcing, it's validating, it's competitive, it's I want to belong, I want to participate, I too engage around the other person's learning and others around me. And you begin to reap the benefits of that natural curiosity plus the reinforcing effect of making it social. And you begin to have this contagious viral effect to learning inside of your organization. But, you know, we are leaving out part of the employees' circle. The employees' needs, their dreams, their ambitions, in theory, do overlap at some level with the organization's need. And so as we go from letting them learn about cooking and space and deep sea diving to looking at them holistically, because they do have professional ambitions, they do have professional curiosities, and they do learn to meet the needs of their career and their challenges. And as we look at them holistically, here are 3 points to empower them as a whole person from where we sit as the professionals. And so it's trust, empower, and personalize. So first, we have to trust. This is, you know, culture is can be aided by a great process. We will talk about that a little bit later. There is hard science to some of the management and culture building. There's the softer side. This is one of the softer sides. Is we have to actually make this leap and trust that our employees do actually want to be good at their jobs and that they do have ambitions that will, if empowered, will carry them and elevate them in our organizations and eventually beyond. but we have to trust them. And this is a very positive sign as we make that jump to trusting our employees. So if your employer were to spend $1,000 per month on you, which would you most prefer? And the most preferred thing for employers investing in me is to help me develop a new skill. But here's, so that's, first we're talking about taking the step because we should. This quote, here we're talking about taking the step because we have to. In today's world, the pace of innovation, never again will we be able to keep up with the pace of business and provide everything that everyone needs to know. So not only should we, but we're going to have to one way or another. The second step is to empower. And, really simply what that means is with the time, the money, and the resources. What we do at Degreed and is you look at your employees holistically. We actually invest $100 per month onto the FlexEd flexible learning accounts of each employee. And employees at Degreed, they get to spend that $100 on any learning at their discretion. So they can learn about the cooking and the deep sea diving and in physics. They can learn whatever they want with that money. Above and beyond that, there's a requirement that we at Degreed, we're above and beyond that, we will meet any learning requirements, but it does have to be in alignment with the organization and with their role. We may have made learning sacred, and so people are allowed to learn at any point during the work week at Degreed. A lot of that informal learning you have to appreciate. It looks like Twitter, and it looks like YouTube, and it looks like people browsing the web. It doesn't look like work, and that is one of the kind of stigmas and challenges to embracing a truly self-directed, informal, culture of learning. And so we talk about learning as sacred. You are welcome at any time to be just browsing the web, being on YouTube, watching videos, and that trust is there, and learning is sacred. And 3 is resources. That the world is overwhelming. There's so many resources out there. Getting the right resource at the right time to do just-in-time learning, is a challenge, and that is part of where we as professionals really come into play. Is empowering people, getting them the tools and the resources to be able to learn what they need to when they need to. And the 3rd is then to personalize. So it will not be about designing personalized training or managing people's learning for them, but rather supporting their own personal learning strategies. Love that quote. So now lastly, this chunk of strategic learning. So while it's a trap to think that top-down we can mandate strategic learning. Strategic learning is not a total impossibility. But the way that we get there is not from top down, but from bottoms up, from empowering our employees and trusting in their intentions and in their goals and in their ambitions and their attempts to be excellent in what they do. And the reality is that while we can't know the challenges they are all up against, they do know the challenges that they are up against, and they can combine that with their aspirations. And so what we have to do as professionals to enable that and to aid in that is to have a clear mission and strategy so that they know where the alignment is. They know the steps they need to take to rise in their ambitions, to rise in the organization, to meet the challenges, and to see the objectives of the organization met. Those have to be clear. They have to be articulated for your employees to know how they are going to, at their own direction, be able to meet that. This is, given time, won't spend a lot of time here, but, I see it as a hierarchy. If we have a clear mission as an organization, a clear vision, a strategy on how we are going to achieve that mission, more tactical objectives that have been outlined that we need to hit. This can be, clear KPIs. This can be clear performance objectives. If those are known and articulated and are clear, policies should be then reinforcing of this. They should enable us to achieve that. They should make us autonomous and leave us with the things that we need to be empowered to reach it. And culture then sits on top of that. And so as we have those things underneath culture clearly articulated, it does enable that strategic learning to be achieved. Given time, I'm not going to talk about Marlin Steele, but a fantastic story out of the Washington Post about how they made their objectives. They used this matrix. It's a really incredible story. It's posted for everyone to see. It's got 125 dimensions. Every employee, every dimension has 4 steps. People are able to progress through the learning and through the objectives of the organization. They are very clearly articulated. Really, really powerful story for anyone who would like to go check that out. Or we can provide a link if we share the recording of this. 3 takeaways. So takeaway number 1, learning cultures focus on the needs of the employee and empower them to achieve their dreams. Takeaway 2, for learning cultures to develop, it doesn't matter what people learn. And takeaway number 3, alignment is achieved through strong mission, strategy, and clear objectives. And in so doing, I do truly believe that you can empower your employees. You can create a transparent, a social, a viral, a contagious culture of learning that will leave your employees curious and voracious and excited to achieve. But we do so by giving them the tools they need, empowering them, personalizing it for them, embracing their directions, trusting them, and in so doing we can make it to meeting their needs and ours. Sorry for the scratchy voice, guys. The conference has left me without too much of a voice, but would invite you all to get credit for this webinar, and you can do so personally by signing up for Degreed as an individual, or of course you are welcome to reach out to us and we can get your organization a demo on how you can do this for your whole team or for your whole company. Would love to, I'm in the middle of kind of crazy conference season. I'll be it's now what, over kind of the next 6 weeks, these 5 conferences. Would love to see any of you who will be there. We'll be speaking at each. We will have a booth at all of them, so come and find us. And with that, in the minutes that we have remaining, I will go back to Mark for Q&A.
Thanks, Dave. So during the presentation, we got a lot of questions. Some I was able to reply to directly. Some I think are better posed to Dave. So with that, let's go through some of the questions that we have queued up here. So the first one, and this is one that probably 5 or 6 people asked relatively the same question. And the question is, how do you sell the ability to allow employees to learn anything they want, for example, post-World War II history, to executives who want to basically just see the bottom line and ROI? It's a hard sell.
Yeah, if I were you, yeah, that's a hard sell. That isn't a sell I would make either. But, I believe it is true. I believe that humans are multifaceted, that intrinsically we are curious and that people love to learn. And, Degreed, we have solved for some of these barriers and for some of these challenges. And how we do it at Degreed is every employee gets their own learning profile. And it is both personal and professional. So I am able to learn about along the many dimensions that I am interested in. But as a member of the organization, there's groups and competencies and smart curation at play. And so as I learn about World War II history, it shows up on my own profile and no one else really ever sees it. But as I learn about project management, the product team sees that. As I learn about revenue recognition, the finance team sees that. As I learn about interaction design, the design and the products team see that. And so people can be learning as multifaceted human beings in the professional context, have the organization have that line of sight into the professional learning, be able to leverage the professional learning, but in the background have that personal learning happening. And the benefit of that is that now people are learning, whatever it is. It's 4, 5, 6, 7x amount. They're engaged around the system. They're engaged in learning that does meet the organization's needs much more. And you just have an engaged, sticky learner instead of a unengaged, kind of a twice a year mandated learning happening on your LMS or in your internal systems.
Next question comes from Krishna. We introduced the concept of a 70-20-10 learning in our organization in mid-2014. The reactions from employees have been great, but the response in terms of adoption has been inconsistent. Our organization has a fast-paced changing environment, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this concept and how we can make learning a practice in everyday life and not something that has to be enforced.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to follow up and engage more deeply, and hearing it at that kind of brief level. The 70-20-10 is really adopting a philosophy, an ideology, an approach. And the challenge you articulated is much more tactical, and it could be any number of reasons. What LMS are you using? What content are you using? What do you empower people to make decisions? Empower them with time, with dollars. So it could be bad design. It could be bad content. It could be so many things. I think, kudos for embracing the approach and the methodology. As you get it tactically into the challenges, I'm not sure, but I do. This is again an area where, this is what we set out to accomplish at Degreed, was to be able to make a product that learners love. Degreed started in 2013, direct to consumers. We operated for over a year before we ever launched with enterprise. Degreed is something that people use because they want to, not because they have to. It got used because people wanted to use it long before it ever got employed in an organizational setting. And so it's a challenge. If we can be of any help, I would welcome the opportunity, and happy to try and answer it with more detail at a later date.
Next question comes from Bob. How do you monitor, track, and report on supporting personal learning strategies? Executives will want to know how this is tracked and reported on.
Sure. So at Degreed, whenever I learn something, whether it's an article, a video, a book, I go to a conference, earn a certificate, do an assessment, take a course, finish a training, whatever it is, it's got a competency profile. And it's also got a score along that competency profile. And so as all of my learning builds, my competencies are building, regardless of the provider or the modality of learning. And then what we're able to do is easily bring that up together by team, by department, by the entire organization. And so you're able to begin to see what competencies are held by whom, at what levels, and the development and progress of competencies over time. And again, you can do that at an individual level, at a team level, at a department level, at the organization level. And so, and again, in the enterprise context, that is then all aligned and filtered by relevant competencies. And so, again, while people will have learned along many dimensions, the data that rolls up is the competencies and the data relevant to that team, to that department, to the organization. And so it does give you this very clean line of sight into all of your employees' learning, not just the stuff they did in the LMS, not just the content they consumed on SharePoint, not just the vendor course they took from Linda, but all the articles, videos, books, conferences, events. It all comes in together with this single window pane into learning and an incredible line of sight.
Okay, I think just due to time, I think we'll have time for one more question. Last question comes from Jordana. How do you manage on-the-job learning that doesn't come from external resources, or learning that comes from conversations with colleagues?
Yeah, our vision at Degreed is any way you can learn or demonstrate learning to be able to capture it in the system. And now we are incredibly holistic and broad in what we capture today. There are yet areas. So, on our horizon is learning games. On our horizon is still podcasts. On our horizon is kind of this micro, peer-to-peer learning. And we certainly hope to be able to capture that. While we can't at that level, we do capture, project-based and experiential learning in bigger chunks. We aren't there yet. It's agreed, and would love to hear any ways that people have been able to capture that, other organizations or attempts they've made to try and do so.
Great, thanks, Dave. With that, I think we'll conclude the Q&A portion of the presentation. So there's a lot of questions, a record number of questions that people asked during this webinar. So if you asked a question, don't worry, we have it all recorded, and we will get back to you via email if we hadn't had a chance to answer your question today. You can also feel free to ask us additional questions. If you'd like to learn more, visit us at get.degreed.com. You can email Dave personally, give us a call, and you can follow us at Degreed on Twitter. Tweet us a question, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, if you'd like to watch the presentation again or share it with a colleague, we'll be sending out a link to the recorded webinar and also just the standalone slides that we usually will get that out to you within 24 hours of the conclusion of this webinar. And then lastly, we do these webinars every month, so we definitely hope you found value in today's webinar, and we hope that you'll join us again for a future webinar. We'll be sending out the invites for our May webinar in about 2 to 3 weeks. And with that, I just wanted to thank everybody for attending and wish you all a great day. Thank you.